This lesson is going to talk about measures and bar lines. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is a measure. A measure is the space between two bar lines, the way music is divided into groups of beats. Okay, so a measure goes from here to here, and we'll talk about those bar lines. You really kind of have to learn these two words together. The space between two bar lines. But I also like for you to know that it's there, the reason we have measures is to divide music, okay? It's about measuring out the music. Think about what the word measure means. You're measuring out a certain number of beats or a certain amount of music into each measure. But realistically, the quickest definition is the space between two bar lines. Now let's talk about what a bar line is. The vertical line placed on a staff to divide the music into measures. So again, these two just go really well together, okay? It also says right here, sometimes a measure is called a bar. So I often will I call everything kind of measures, but sometimes people say start at bar 30, and that's the same thing as saying measure 30, okay? Or play two measures or two bars of music. It's kind of the same thing. All right, so a bar line is the vertical line that divides music into measures, okay? All right, now a double bar line is two bar lines close together on a staff that mark the end of a section. So it's a symbol used to divide two sections of music. Now I'm going to show you another one. It's going to look almost the same to you. A final bar line is two bar lines that are close together. Two bar lines. The second one is slightly thicker that mark the end of the song. Okay. Now if you look at these, you can probably tell here there is a slight difference. But there's not much of a difference. And when you draw it or when people just hand draw it, it's kind of hard to tell the difference, okay? The difference is this one is slightly thicker, okay? But for the purpose of these worksheets here, for the most part, I've only used final bar lines. And I did that because it's very difficult right here for you to be able to tell on a copied piece of paper when it's that small, whether it's a double bar line or a final bar line. So in this workbook, I've only used final bar lines. However, in music, sometimes you'll have one that's this. It's a double bar line and it separates music. So it's very important that you understand like what it is and why it's slightly different. But for the most part, we're going to talk about final bar lines, which tell you it's the end of the music. Okay, all right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is measure numbers. So earlier I said something about you could play measure 32 or something like that. So when you play a song, sometimes when you first start, your songs might have about 8 measures or 8 bars. But when you get into more advanced music, you'll have hundreds of measures, sometimes thousands. So you have to be able to number your measures so you know which measure we're talking about. So the way that you're going to do that is you're just going to draw a very small number right above your measure, and that tells you which one you're on. So let's do some practice with these. First thing is we're going to review, we're going to put a clef in the box. Now you put whichever clef you play in. I'm going to use both. So here's your pictures of the clef. So if you're treble clef, you can do treble. If you're bass, you can do bass. I'm going to do a treble clef. So if you're a bass clef player, before I do that, I want you right here to draw half of a heart. And then I want you to put 2 dots on the top and bottom of the 4th line, counting from the bottom up. 1, 2, 3, 4, dot, dot. Okay? Treble clef, I'm going to do it with you though. I start at the top and I go down and draw a little J at the bottom, just a little curve at the bottom of the line. Then I draw half a circle, kind of looks like a tiny little P. And then I draw a 6 that goes around the 2nd line. Okay? And that's not my best treble clef ever, and that's okay. It takes a while to learn how to draw a treble clef, and especially when you're stopping and doing it, it's going to look a little bit disjointed, but this is more just about you getting the hang of it, okay? So it's okay if it doesn't look perfect. All right, so it says place a clef in the box below. We did that. I'm going to put a check because there's lots of directions on this one. Complete the 4 bar lines and 1 final bar line on the staff. So it started for you. You're just going to finish it. So you're going to draw a bar line there, another one here. You just finish those out, draw them down to the bottom. They just go right to the first line of the staff, counting from the bottom up. So the bottom line is line 1. And then here I'm going to try to make my final bar line noticeably thicker on the 2nd line, okay? All right, so we did our 4 bar lines. We did our 1 final bar line on the staff. Remember, the staff is the 5 lines and 4 spaces upon which music is written. All right, now you're supposed to circle measure 2. That is so that we know that you understand where measure 2 is. This is measure 1. Usually measure 1 will not have a measure number because it's measure 1. So we know it's measure 1. So here is measure 2. So you're just going to circle measure 2 so we know that you know it's there. Then it says put a star in measure 4. So you can just see right here is measure 4. Now again, think if we had 30 measures and I said put a star in measure 28 and you had to count all the way to 28. It's much easier. Just find the number, put a star. It doesn't have to be a beautiful star. You can even, if you want to do a star just like this, that's fine. Okay. All right. Now let's come down here. Now it says add a clef. This time I'm going to do a bass clef. So I'm going to draw half a heart. And then I'm going to put my dot on the top and the bottom. If you're a treble clef person, you can do what I did up here. Do it down here. Draw a straight line with a little curve at the end, kind of like a J. Little tiny curve up here, half a circle, that's like a P. And then draw your 6 going around the second line. Okay? All right, so we did that. Add a clef. I'm going to check it because, again, some of these have lots of directions. You don't want to forget anything. Circle the quarter notes in measure 1. Now, this is going back to review what we did last time. So a quarter note, remember, gets 1 beat. So this is what we're looking for. We want a filled-in note head and a stem. So it says circle the quarter notes in measure 1, only in measure 1. Okay, so I'm going to look at measure 1, and I'm going to circle these 2 notes that look like my quarter note. Okay, now the next direction is to circle the half note in measure 2. So here's measure 2. You're going to find the one that has an open note head with a stem. You're going to circle the half note in measure 2. Put a little check on those. Now it says what kind of note is in measure 3. So again, we're going back to last week, or sorry, the last lesson. Okay, a whole note gets 4 beats, and it is just an open circle. So this is a whole note. Remember, it's spelled W-H-O-L-E, whole, like the entire whole. It takes up a whole measure. We'll talk about that more soon. Okay, but notice it's the only note in that measure because it takes up the whole measure. Has a duration of 4 beats. All right. Oh, and I just gave you this answer. And it lasts for, I just said it, 4 beats. Okay. All right. How many quarter rests in measure 4? So you're going to count, this is not a quarter rest, right? That's a half note. The quarter rests are the ones that kind of look like a Z with a C under it. So it's this and this. So we have 1 here, 2 total. So you're going to write a 2 right there. And then it asks you to add a final bar line at the end. So you're going to draw a line down, not quite at the end, but right before it. And then right at the end, you're going to draw another one. Try to make it a little bit thicker if you want it to look real official. But it's okay if it doesn't look perfect. All right. One more little exercise here. Okay, again, you get to add a clef. So add whichever clef you play in. I'm going to go ahead and go back to treble clef here. I'm going to do it down and over, and then this time I'm going to do it all in one motion. You may not be ready for that, but you go down, around, and it's going to look a little bit better if you do it that way, not so choppy, but it takes a while to get the hang of treble clef, okay? All right, now, so we added our clef. I'm going to put a little check mark. Draw a bar line, okay? Remember our bar line is just a single line. We're going to draw a bar line every 4 beats. So I'm going to count my beats. Count with me in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Because a quarter note, each quarter note is a duration of 1 beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's how we're going to count those. Then I'm going to draw a bar line. Now I'm going to start counting again. Let me actually do this. When I get to the bar line, I'm going to start counting a new measure. So now this is my first beat. Second beat, third beat, and remember, a half note gets 2 beats, so it's beat 3 and beat 4. So now I've got my 4 beats. I'm going to draw a bar line. Okay, now here's another half note, so that's going to be beat 1 and 2. Then another half note, there's beat 3 and 4, so I've got my 4 beats. I'm going to draw a bar line. All right, now here's a quarter note, it gets 1 beat. Now here's a quarter rest. Sometimes people see that and it's a rest, so it doesn't have any sound, and they don't want to give it a full beat, but it still gets a full beat. Just like this quarter note takes up that much space, this quarter rest takes up that much space. And this quarter note takes up that much space. My lines are not exactly perfect, but you get the idea. So it's taking up time and space. It's just whether it's making a sound or whether it's silent. So beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, bar line, and then it says draw a final bar line at the end. I'm going to draw final bar line. Second line is a little bit thicker. Then it asks you to number the measures. Now I probably shouldn't have written it. Well, I mean, it's fine if you did it, if you wrote that, but let's go ahead now. I said you usually don't put a bar line measure number on measure 1 because we know it's measure 1. So I'm going to just start on measure 2, measure 3, measure 4. And if you wrote your numbers, that's fine. And here's measure 5. If you did not write your numbers, that's fine as well. That was not in the direction. So if you did it, great. If not, that's totally fine. All right, and so, but do make sure you have the numbers measured. Then the final question, it asks you which measure has 2 half notes. So you need to figure out which of those measures has 2 half notes. And I think you'll agree it's this measure right here, half note, half note. So you look up here, and that is measure number 3. The link to the next lesson in this video series can be found in the description below.